My friends, if you've been watching this channel for a while by now, I'm hoping you understand how a compressor works, because I've probably made like 15 videos about it in different formats. But today, we're gonna get very specific. I'm with Chris Yetter of AudioScape, and we're going to be talking about how an opto compressor works. And we're gonna be taking this back to the basics with the first popular opto compressor that there was. In the simplest format, with an opto compressor, an audio signal is feeding into a light element, and then it is shining onto a resistor?
Yeah, a
right.
photoresistor, yeah.
Onto a photoresistor, and depending on that, well, I'll let you get more into that, but that's in its most basic form. There's a lot of amazing components that determine different things that happen and how the thing sounds, but Chris,
yeah,
how does an opto compressor work?
So that's a great question, and this is no better example than the granddaddy of opto compressors. I think the heart and soul of an opto compressor is the T4B module. A lot of people place importance on this, and for good reason, because this module right here is what creates the compression effects that sort of quintessential. When you think of an opto compressor, you're thinking of this. This is the heart and soul of it. So like you were mentioning, the input signal comes in. It's also obviously going through the output amp and all that, and at the same time simultaneously, but it's coming in and it's hitting this T4B. The simplest way to describe what this does is, imagine like the light in the back of your phone, right?
Yeah.
Imagine just singing or sending signal into something, and this light, as you sing harder or as the signal increases, it gets brighter. So this light is getting brighter, and at the same time, it's hitting these two photoresistors, photocells, whatever you want to call them. They're sort of up against the panel there. And as the light gets brighter, it's increasing the impedance on this photoresistor, which is creating that gain reduction element.
Got it.
So the reason we use two as well, a lot of people may not know this, they may know this or not. Instead of just one, there's only one that's actually doing that compression effect. The other one is to make sure that the metering is accurate. So that's why there's two of these photocells, photoresistors. So that's part of the calibration process that we use here on the Optos to make sure that the meter agrees. So say if you're in output +4, you send a sine wave through it and you go to 0, and then you turn this here and you're getting 10 dB of compression at 40, and then you turn it to gain reduction mode, you're gonna wanna make sure that it matches, and that's what that second photocell is for. So that is kind of, in a quick nutshell, what the T4B is doing with the EL panel light, we'll call it, getting brighter or not as bright, hitting those photocells. So right as that input signal comes in, that's what's going to it. And also there's 4 tubes in the opto, and they all have their different roles, but one of the most important ones for the T4B is actually this 6AQ5 right here, because this sends the control voltage to the T4B. So when I was talking about how this is the squash tube, this is basically, that's the purpose of this tube. So it's super important. This is one of the ones that we sort of tube roll and cherry pick, and we see how it reacts, because it does change the behavior of the T4B. So it's not like you can just pop in whatever T4B, and it's everything working together. There's this sort of synergy going on. All the while this is going on, it's going through the makeup output gain amp, which a lot of people I've seen some confusion online about this. This is a separate component from the gain reduction element here in the 2A. So this is just a makeup gain amp. I think it gets confusing because it's on the left side of the panel and not the right, but this is actually makeup gain. So, and there's only 2 tubes that control that. There's the first position, 12AX7, and the output, 12BH7, right? So basically these 2 tubes right here, this is what consists of your audio portion of the 2A. And then these 2 tubes here, this is the side chain. So that's these 2 tubes, 12AX7 to 6AQ5, that's what controls the side chain essentially. So it's a good way to look at it, I guess, in blocks. So if you're ever if you have an old LA2A or any sort of, version of this compressor and there's noise, a lot of times it's gonna be that first tube. That's, if it's got lowered output and it's distorting, maybe the 12BH7 needs to be changed. if the compression's dying, it could be one of those compression tubes. So it's kind of important to know, at least if you have a device like this, what each tube does, because it's going to save you a ton of time. Instead of just, let me retube the whole thing, it's time. Usually it's just one tube that's, going bad, and you may have a tube in there that's good for another 30 years, so.
Okay, tell me if this is a dumb question. So with an opto cell, actually I have two questions about the opto cell. The LED is feeding the opto cell.
Yep.
If the opto cell is already inside of a box and the box is closed, why does it need to be inside of an enclosure?
It is very important that those photocells are in a dark environment. Now, that's a great question actually, because for instance, the V3As we sell, we actually made a cover to go over the module. Like lots of 500 series modules don't have covers on them.
Yeah.
But that does, because it keeps those photocells. We still have like foam, and like we had to construct, because it's a 500 series module, we had to construct the T4B in a different way. It's literally the same construction as what's inside there, but it's like a panel board that sits over with some foam and it covers it. It makes it pretty dark. But if, say, you put it as the last unit at like the furthest right one in your 500 series chassis and there's nothing to the right of it, it's gonna let that light in, and it's gonna always, the meter's not gonna go to zero. It's gonna be like further back, because it's actually showing gain reduction, because there's just that little bit of light bleeding in. So you don't want any light bleeding in at all. So enclosing it is super important, keeping it in its own sort of environment. To me, it's still just such a genius invention so many years later. It's just the brain power that went into making this cell and thinking of using it in this manner it's awesome.
Okay, so my next question is, there's no attack and release on an opto compressor. So how does one determine how fast or how slow an opto cell reacts?
That's a great question. And it's something that's not often talked about, because they just, you see usually with, T4B manufacturers that sell them, aftermarket or, as replacements, and they just label them as slow, or they sell slow and fast. And in reality, it's a huge range.
Yeah, what does that mean?
It's a narrow range overall, but there is a range in variance, just like going back to what we were talking about before, using components with variances. So there is a variance, and we kind of grade them all differently. Like there's slow, there's medium slow, there's medium fast, and there's fast. And this obviously correlates to the attack time and the release time. And a lot of it, I think, which we tend to notice more, is the release time. Like when it gets done, if it's taken 2 years to get back to zero, then maybe, hey, that's maybe just a little too slow.
Yeah.
But and then if conversely, if it's just going right back to zero, it's just like, well, that's cool, but that's not what this is supposed to be. So we can't use that. So that's kind of like the cutoff range. A lot of times is the release speed is really a deciding factor.
Okay, well, knowing that those are the tubes that you put in here, what goes into picking which tubes you're gonna put into an opto compressor? Or like what makes it make more sense than another tube? Like is there like a standard or what is it?
Yeah, there are standard starting points we have, but it's a process like anything. The audio tubes, we have certain standards. The sidechain tubes, we have certain standards for testing. For the audio tubes, V1, V2, that's a 12AX7, 12BH7. One of our favorite tubes to use is these actually medium gray plate RCAs from the 60s for V1. They seem to be the most consistent. They're not all of them by all means, but as far as lowest noise, lowest hum level, lowest microphonics, you tap the front panel, you might hear a little bit of microphonic, but sometimes those things can get really, really obnoxious and make a unit unusable. So think about V1. This is like the first thing your sound is hitting is this tube, basically, in the audio section. So it's the most critical for tone. And then the output tubes are important as well. This is actually like one of the ones we used in yours. This is a long black plate RCA 12BH7. And this is the output tube, like I was mentioning. Listening for fidelity is important with this tube. First of all, we wouldn't put it in there because we tube test each unit, but if it's dying, you're gonna notice, reduced output and reduced fidelity. It could starts sounding like crap, to be honest with you. The sidechain tubes, 12AX7 and the 6AQ5, you will notice a difference in the behavior of the compression with these tubes. So we're really listening for how do they react? How do they react under duress in particular?
Yeah.
Because most of the time, modest settings, they're all gonna sound pretty good, you know, but how does it react when it's limits up, it's full on, and we'll literally, we'll just crank, usually it's a drum loop or a vocal, something really hot coming in, and we'll just crank the snot out of it, and then we'll sort of just sweep this HF control, its limit sensitivity, and just see how it sounds. But at the same time, what works in one unit doesn't work in another because the tolerances are so wide. So that's why you have to sort of curate every single unit, and you have to go through and listen and test and be like, at the end of the day, is it fun to use? Like, going back to just simple basic things, is this something I want to sit and get lost in for a while? That kind of mentality, and sort of that's what we're looking for in Final QC. Is some of it's a little more esoteric, and you know, it's subjective, but that's what we do. That's what, kind of like anyone in Final QC, that's what we're really training their ear for as well too. Like, is this fun to use? And oh crap, I need to get back to work. I'm playing with this thing. You know, like,
yeah.
That's kind of all of that together in one, what we're looking for.
And
so,
can you explain what the high frequency knob is actually doing here?
This is actually one of the most misunderstood things.
Yeah, I know. That's why I want you to say.
So a lot of people email and they're like, "Is this?" They're just basically asking the roundabout way, is saying, "Is this a sidechain filter?" And it is not. What this is this is a limit sensitivity control. Right when this is fully clockwise, it basically the whole full frequency range is sensitive to compression. It's like. And as you start sweeping this counterclockwise, it becomes more sensitive to higher frequencies. So it's still compressing the full frequency range, but the side chain, it's telling that side chain to target higher frequencies. So all the way when it's counterclockwise, I think it's around 16K. If I don't quote me on that, I'll double check, but I believe it's around that range, somewhere like around almost like a de-esser kind of range. And basically then that range becomes the most sensitive to compression. That's what's triggering that compression, is that frequency, but it's still compressing everything.
So it's focusing on the high frequency and not focusing on the subs.
Yeah, it's basically a sensitivity control.
Well, I mean, this might not focus on subs, but we definitely do. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, notification bell, and like button if you're enjoying the content. And of course, follow us as well as AudioScape and everything that we're gonna be doing with the videos that we're putting out in the series. Okay, well, I think now we have a basic understanding of how an opto compressor works, but what exactly would you use it on? Me, myself being a singer, the first thing I'm always going to is vocals, but obviously it sounds good on other things. I know what I would use it on. What is your intended use of it, since you're somebody that's making them?
What I love about it, anything you throw through it's gonna sound better. Like, you just throw anything through it, it's already better. Like, and it's so people could, you know, describe it as transparent, but it can, you know, you can definitely get going if you start pushing that peak reduction higher too. And there's just something, it's just butter, it's classic. Pair it with something maybe that's a little bit more aggressive, like we all, you know, we were just talking about earlier. Any sort of 76 revision that we sell, you know, either before or after, depending on your preference, is excellent. I mean, it's just classic vocal chain right there. I mean that those two in series together, there's just nothing like it. You know, it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I think vocals, like you were saying, bass, acoustic guitar. I mean, you know, some people even love tambourines for it. So
okay.
It's just,
well, there you guys have it. An understanding of how an opto compressor works and some things to use it on. Big fans for me to use it on. Love using it on bass, especially if I'm looking for like that 60s, 70s, like Motown-ish type sound, which I've been doing a lot more of lately. Obviously on vocals. Sound solid on keys too. Like, pretty much what he's saying. I typically don't reach for these for drums because I'm looking for something that attacks transients a little bit faster, and you know, a FET or a VCA is kind of where my mind goes with that, but everything else is pretty much where I reach for this guy. So yep, that's pretty much a wrap up on this subject. Thanks so much once again, Chris.
Miami, thank you.
And hopefully you guys learned a little bit about this. If you had any questions about it, or if there's some things that you feel like we didn't answer in this video, feel free to leave it in the comments below and we'll get back to you guys like we always do.
I could nerd out on this all day, so please comment.
Definitely, yeah, bother him. Email him and you guys can continue talking about it there. So until next time, guys, catch you later.